Hello. You've caught me having my biannual think about NPCs. It's a strange life they lead, isn't it? From the perspective of us flesh and blood humans at least. NPCs have no real concept of free will, given they're programmed to act and react in specific ways. Neither do they perceive time, like us privileged protagonists. For an NPC, entire days could flash by within minutes when we decide to skip forward 24 hours because we, don't like the weather or something. Or it could drag on for hundreds of hours depending on the game. Does this affect the way they age? Do NPCs have birthdays? What happens if I skip forward a few hours while they're on the toilet? These are the sorts of questions that keep me up at night. One thing we can all agree on is that as soon as NPCs come into contact with us, the main character, they're going to be well and truly perplexed. Imagine going about your business, whether that's repeatedly chopping the same plank of wood or staring at the sky, repeating the same 3 lines of dialogue to yourself, when all of a sudden, this unpredictable, socially unaware, terrifyingly silent newcomer comes toggle crouching past, wearing mismatched armour and what looks suspiciously like that family heirloom you had locked in your bedroom cupboard. They stare at you for a few seconds, then casually murder the neighbouring shopkeeper before running away shouting. Here are 7 weird things gamers do that must absolutely baffle NPCs. Let's start with environmental exploits, a fancy term I'm using to describe doing stuff within the laws of the game, but not the spirit of the game. For example, the bucket trick in Skyrim. For the uninitiated, the bucket trick is the act of placing a bucket over a shopkeeper's head so they can't see anything, allowing us to shoplift to our heart's content without getting caught. It's a funny quirk that highlights the ingenuity of gamers pushing systems to their limits and trying new things. But let's think about this from the perspective of an NPC. You're in the queue for the local apothecary, wanting to buy some wart balm. The person in front of you shoves a bucket on the shopkeeper's head, and the next thing you know, they're walking out the front door with a basket full of minor potions of healing and a full apothecary uniform. You turn to the shopkeeper, who is now wearing only the bucket and refusing to acknowledge you. Then you're forcibly transported out of the shop and into the local tavern where it's magically nighttime all of a sudden. There's a bard singing unintelligibly bad songs, and you've still got a face full of warts. Woe is the life of a Skyrim NPC. Especially if you're an NPC in my game of Skyrim. The second weird thing gamers do that must baffle NPCs is when, during a very intense combat encounter, you decide to stop fighting and start rifling through the pockets of dead enemies. Not only is this a flagrant violation of in-game combat etiquette, I imagine it's really quite unhelpful for any NPCs fighting alongside you. You're winning the fight, when all of a sudden the person doing all the work is over there stealing a dead person's trousers. And also getting all the good loot before you even get a chance. How selfish. But really, this is all about the poor NPCs being left to fend for themselves. I mean, you're the protagonist. You're the one slicing, dicing, or otherwise mowing down the majority of the bad guys. For NPCs, that's increasing their chance of survival while decreasing the amount of work they have to do. A pretty cushy deal. So the second that deal ends, and they're left to face the horrors of war alone, it's not going to be welcomed with open arms. Nor is the sword that goes between their ribs. You know when you're chatting to someone, but they're lost in their own world and don't respond? I imagine that's how NPCs feel during baffling thing number 3, spending ages choosing dialogue. Only much worse, because you at least know that the person ignoring you in real life is still breathing, and not just a glassy-eyed, perfectly still player character staring absently into your soul. You'd get more back talking to your fridge. But hey, maybe we're deliberating which piece of dialogue to choose during a critical story moment. You don't want to rush things after all, or maybe we've just used the conversation with an NPC as an opportunity to go to the toilet. Either way, the poor NPC that's halfway through explaining their backstory is standing there offended, uncomfortable, and expecting an answer that might not come for flipping ages. You know, if it is a critical moment in the story, it would be nice if the player responded with some urgency. Seriously, it must be incredibly daunting to be an NPC that is forced to rely on an important individual that, amongst all the other baffling behaviours, occasionally loses all lucidity and seems to focus entirely on something in the middle distance. One more reason not to be an NPC when we grow up. The fourth thing that definitely baffles all NPCs is player twitching. This is the word I've assigned to all repetitive behaviours the player exhibits when they're supposed to be standing still and paying attention, and it's basically the opposite of the last entry when it happens in conversation. There are multiple forms of twitching, so I've decided to rank them all out of 10 using my new invention, the NPC baffleometer. Behaviour A, toggle crouching. That's a 3. It could just be a weird stretch, to be fair. Behaviour B, running around in circles. That's a 5. Definitely not typical behaviour. Behaviour C, jumping on the spot. I'd say that's coming in at a 4. It could just be limbering up for battle, of course. Behaviour D, indiscriminately waving your weapon about in the NPC's face. Spiked to an 8, that one. It's disconcerting and terrifying. Behaviour E, attacking the NPC when they're invulnerable. That's coming in at a 0. Why is it a 0? They're actually dead. Baffling player behaviour number 5 is specifically crouching, something that pops up a lot in this list, but in this specific context, it's crouching in multiplayer games to signal friendliness. You'll most often see this in extraction shooters like Ark Raiders, but you can also see it taking place in shared hub worlds or pre-lobbies. I'm not sure how squatting over and over again became the default way to express kinship, but it seems to be pretty much universal now. And of course, the faster someone crouches, the friendlier they are. And while the meaning of this coded behaviour is obvious to those of us who know, imagine being an NPC, standing there all innocently, probably a vendor of some kind, waiting for someone to come and buy something, and you look out into a sea of this. Crouching, 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 crouching,
My God.
crouching, crouching, crouching,
It's full of
crouching,
crouching.
crouching. Sometimes, when I'm playing a multiplayer game and just hanging out in the communal area, I'll stop for a moment and just observe. You know, like sitting by a window in a coffee shop and people watching. Some people are sprinting past on their way to whatever upgrade. Some are jumping, because as we all know, constantly jumping is the fastest means of on-foot video game traversal. Some are throwing down dance emotes, trying to coax other players into joining in. And some are crouching. Crouching, 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 as if to say, I'm here, I exist, notice me please.
We're a strange lot, aren't we? Especially from the point of view of an NPC.
We've already mentioned how player choice must be confusing for NPCs, but there's arguably no choice harder for them to try and understand than a moral choice. So that's number 6, our moral choices. Because let's face it, human beings are complex creatures. Our actions aren't always easy to understand in the moment. And even if you get a sense of who someone is, we're a species of inconsistent hypocrites at best. Which is fine because very few people are burdened with the kind of world-altering decisions that take place in video games.
But for the NPC, protagonists are the only people who can make those kinds of decisions.
So imagine their surprise when the player, who has up until now been nothing but a saint, donating to the needy, sticking up for those in need, helping the locals with silly fetch quests, returns out of the blue before systematically laying waste to everyone and everything in your town, muttering about needing more XP. This hero, this beacon of goodness that you would trust your life with, now ruthlessly chopping down the local guards with impunity.
Late game bosses are hard, what can I say? I need all the help I can get.
Or maybe we're on a second playthrough and have decided to be the bad guy this time, probably for a trophy. The NPC has a memory from their past life lingering in their heart, telling them this stranger is a force for good and should be trusted to help guide the village through the darkness, and say,
Sucker, that's my horse now.
It's no wonder NPCs don't trust us. The final weird thing gamers do guaranteed to baffle NPCs is something I guarantee every single person watching this has done at some point. Rage quit. There's no judgment, especially from me. You know, games can be hard, and it's always healthier to take a break and come back later than it is to soldier on and cause more harm.
But you know who doesn't have that luxury? NPCs.
They're trapped in that reality until you come back. That room filling with poisonous gas or zombies or grenades, they're still there. Presumably dying over and over and over again, looping incessantly in the hope that one day their hero comes back to alleviate their Promethean cycle of suffering. And if that's not what happens, then what does? Reality ceases to exist, along with any semblance of consciousness, until the save is booted up again to return the NPCs to that same torment their apparent death just freed them from.
It's hardly any better, is it?
It is, in fact, one of the most terrifying propositions I can think of. So while it would be baffling, I also think it would be so much worse than all 6 of the previous entries on this list combined. At least it would be quick, though, I suppose.
What a lovely note to end on.
And that was 7 weird things gamers do that must totally baffle NPCs. If this video didn't baffle you, please give it a like and leave a comment about your most NPC confusing behaviours below. And if you want to stay baffled by more video game silliness, as well as keeping up to date with all things PlayStation, then make sure to subscribe and click the notification bell. Thanks for watching, and see you again soon.
PlayStation